evening on the public hearing portion of it. I'm going to go through the individual changes that we're talking about. I'll do them individually, and as soon as I have announced one, we will give anyone from the public the opportunity to come up to the podium, identify themselves, and they can speak to any concerns or so forth that we can listen and we'll hear to on it and such. So we will start the public hearing at this time then. Our first change is that we talked about, we had some discussions on page 20 in our zoning ordinance. We did not have language that addressed irregularly shaped lots as such. And we are proposing that we add a clause to it that will read as follows. Irregularly shaped lots, in the case of an irregularly shaped lot which is unable to meet the 250-foot lot depth, the depth shall be waived provided that said lot contains enough acreage to meet all the setback requirements for dwellings or other structures. Nothing else in that section of the ordinance changes, but that wording as such. Is there anyone here that wants to speak to that issue? All right, if not, I will move over to our next one. Is on page 22 of our UDO. And it was needed to clarify the setback on front yard from road or street. Because we have some roads or streets that have a right-of-way that's designated that gives them a certain width. And then we have others that there's not a right-of-way dedicated. So where do you measure from as such? So under the minimum front yard setback, we are proposing to add language that will read 25 feet from the right-of-way or 55 feet from the center of the road if right-of-way is not dedicated by written recorded document. So it would make it clear that we either come off the edge that's dedicated at 25 foot, and if there's not a dedicated right-of-way, it's 55 foot from the center line. Anyone want to address that issue? All right. We'll move on. The next one is very straightforward. On page 34 in our light industrial zoning areas, I think it was probably just an oversight, but we had listed wireless communication facilities under a permitted use. And we're proposing on that it be moved from being a permitted use to where it would be a special exception use. So if someone was wanting to put up a cell tower in a light industrial area, they would have to come to the BZA, the Board of Zoning Appeals, and put forth their argument and meet the requirements, and the BZA would rule whether or not that was appropriate for that area or not based on a group of standards as such. The property owners surrounding it then are also given notice, adjoining property owners, so they have an opportunity to come to the meeting as well and make themselves heard. Anyone want to speak to that issue? All right. Then we will move on over on the next one. Also deals on page 78, dealt with cell towers, and we had some discussion. And because we had required some additional setback for wind towers of 1.3, the height of the wind towers, we had put forth proposal that we would require similar language for cell towers. Well, since we've proposed this and we have talked to our legal counsel and we've ran it by outside legal that helped with our original UDO, we have discovered that there is both state and federal ordinances that does not allow us to set greater setbacks for communication, cell towers, or so forth than we do general other structures. There's language there that you can have fall zones, but you have to rely on what's engineered by the cell company, or either the county would have to hire their own engineer to put forth an argument as to why they don't think that cell tower would collapse within the fall zone. So does anyone want to address the cell tower issue? And okay, then on page 107 of our current ordinance, we had put in language under manufactured home occupancies that required that if a manufactured home is more than 10 years old, that when the structure is initially placed on the lot, that there was certain special variants and exceptions they had to go through on that. After we passed that, or during about the same period of time that we were writing our UDOs, the Indiana legislature passed a state law that limited to where you cannot place an age requirement on a mobile home. So we are proposing that language will be stricken from our UDO. Does anyone want to address it? Okay. We'll move on. The other main issue that we're changing, and it came and was brought to our attention when we adopted the UDO, that we had not included a provision that defined the definition of a gun range or a shooting range. And so at that time, we had made a commitment that we would add that definition at a future date when we were reviewing the ordinance and so forth. And we are proposing language that would read as such. On page 185, under gun range, it says the shooting range. And then we move on the shooting range definition, and I will read it out loud as well. Shooting range, any land, property, premise, place, or facility that is used, designated, intended, or operated on a regular or structured basis, primarily for the purpose of the discharge of firearms and/or shooting of archery equipment, whether publicly or privately owned, and whether or not operated for profit. Shooting range does not include a facility owned or operated by a municipal corporation, county, township, police district, or joint police district. Shooting range does not include accessory or incidental target practice areas on private property infrequently used by private property owners. And so I'll open it up. Does anyone want to comment and address our definition on shooting range? Step on up.
I've been asked to make sure this was entered into record.
Yes, I was going to mention that shortly. There was an email that was sent out, and we have been certain to distribute a copy of that to all of our board members for their consideration. We ran it by as well to our legal counsel and so forth. And when we get into our regular meeting, we'll comment a little bit on that. We may have some comments or feedback on that side. Is there anything else you want to add on?
I was kind of concerned about the private property. Is that can only the owner of that property use that land for shooting?
Our definition doesn't define that as far as whether it would only be the owner or not of that property.
Okay.
You know, our main purpose is to regulate the use of the land in such a manner as to where there's not going to be a burden or devaluation on the quality of life and property values of surrounding property owners.
Okay.
And so I can see situations it would be difficult. You could probably write a stack this high and to see if someone shoots on their property and decides that they're going to do that at 1 a.m. with a 50 caliber, it's probably going to get a little different reaction than someone that occasionally goes out with a shotgun or a 22 or a 30-30 and does some sighting in or target practice. So
I'm speaking more of like maybe weekly skeet shooting or trap shooting. That'd be prohibited.
If it was done in a organized manner and as a activity there, it probably would be prohibited.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Who's deciding what the organized manner is, because it's not really clearly defined?
The what?
The organized manner that you spoke of.
I believe it would come about as far as before the Plan Commission on interpretation, the administrator of the ordinance, if there's an issue that comes up in the county and there's a complaint that is filed about it. You know, if someone is shooting on their property and the neighbors feel that it's a violation of the area, or if county officials become aware of it and feel that it is a violation of the ordinance, it would be brought to the Plan Commission's meeting for consideration. There would be discussion. The property owner that's shooting on property would have an opportunity to be able to come in and listen to that discussion and participate in it and so forth, and see where it would fit in on that side of things. Plan commission to make a decision. If the property owner disagreed that precision, there's provisions. First, they could appeal that to the BZA as such. The BZA would rule further on it. If they didn't like the ruling, then they can appeal that to the court system as such.
My concern is if the definition is not very specific. So if there is a complaint, because it's not, that's a lot of steps for somebody to continue to be able to use their property
Right.
without
Mhm.
constant
Right, I understand.
legal. So should this be considered to be maybe reviewed to be more clear, because it says not on personal property, but then it also says beginning any land, property, premises. So it kind of goes back and forth, and that leaves a lot of interpretation.
Okay.
So it leaves the citizens up to whether their neighbor is going to complain.
Well, you have that regardless of what the ordinance says to a big extent. It's not unusual to get complaints on a piece of property that it may not be a violation at all.
But with it being this broad, it leaves it
Right.
really open for a lot of interpretation for complaints.
Right. And we'll talk about it here in our meeting as a group and see what their thoughts are, but I appreciate your comments on it.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else? If not, we will adjourn the hearing at this time. Appreciate everyone's input this evening.